Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. We welcome your questions and comments. Hit us up at dj@artistfirst.com. All past shows are archived. Pick up the podcast at artistfirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, C-Man, and we are Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Here we are.
Here we are. And we are happy to be here.
Indeed.
Can't you tell? And tonight, for all you long-time listeners, long-time fans of the Soul of the Everyman, we're going to do one of our favorite perennial topics. So now, if you guessed death, you're wrong this time. Because, if it's not death, yeah, we do have fun. Well, tonight, it's the other perennial topic, which is love. Those two are intertwined, death, love, death. Margaret's looking at me like I have just grown 3 heads, and I may have. You never know. But we are going to talk tonight about love. But love is one of those, and death, for that matter, is one of those topics which is inexhaustible because, so much of our lives revolves around both of those two, giant things, and they are themselves intertwined. But tonight we're not going to talk about death, but we are going to talk about losing yourself in the context of love. And I believe the crux of our sort of the thrust of our argument tonight is that you really can't love unless you lose something else, which is very important to most people, which is you lose yourself. And I can hear folks saying, well, how do those two things go together? One of the biggest obstacles to successfully being able to love someone is you. And it's not your breath or your deodorant. It's just you. Everyone hates you. No. Well, no, that's not true. But the problem is everyone loves themselves, too much. And it's easy to do. You really do fall in love with yourself. You fall in love with your ego falls in love with itself, and it loves talking about itself. It loves having other people talk about it. And if there's anything going on, the ego wants to relate it to itself.
Oh, it's true.
It's all true. And that is it's a perfectly good function of that piece of you. But love is so much more vast than the ego. And you're reminded of Pygmalion, this wonderful legend, this Greek myth of the person who creates, in essence, a mirror and then falls in love with his own image, with seeing himself in the other. A lot of relationships start there, Margaret. They start with seeing yourself in the other. But I would contend that the biggest obstacle to a deeper relationship is forcing oneself onto the other, if you will. In other words, putting yourself. You take the other, who is a unique individual, and you have some resonance, you have some relationship. But I think those relationships can become superficial if the part of the relationship which you can't get over is you. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do, actually.
Yeah.
Brings to mind the two Greek myths. One is Narcissus, and the other is Pygmalion.
Did I get those two confused?
I don't know. You did reference a mirror, but you could talk about both in the same way.
Yeah.
Narcissus is the one who saw his reflection in the water and just fell deeply in love with that reflection.
So that was the one I was referencing. It was
okay.
That was Narcissus. Yes, sorry.
And Pygmalion is someone who had sculpted the perfect woman, his ideal, and then pleaded with I think it was Aphrodite, to imbue the sculpture with life. And it's very interesting because if you look for a reflection of yourself in another person, and all you keep doing is looking at that reflection for you, as opposed to looking at the person for themselves, then you are talking about Narcissus. You know, the world's just revolving around your reflection. And when you're thinking of Pygmalion, he had put all of his hopes and dreams and his skill into this form. And which is interesting because putting your hopes and dreams into a form is another way of finding your own reflection again.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. When you first start to have a relationship with somebody, if it goes no further than what about them reminds you of you, then it's a very, it's a very...
It's a tight little circle.
I hesitate to say, but it is true. It's sort of an incestuous relationship with yourself. You are not falling in love with the other. You're falling in love with what the other sees in you, or what you see reflected of yourself in the other.
Well, that's two levels. It's like you're seeing yourself in that person, and then you want to know what that person sees about you.
Right, exactly. And sometimes the relationship, and when we all know relationships where in essence the basis of it is that one of the people in the relationship is looking for validation or for a reflection of themselves and what they think they lack from the other. You know?
Oh, you mean completing themselves?
Yes. Well, and that's interesting also, because when people say I'm looking for someone to complete me, they're really looking for themselves in the other.
But that I associate with Pygmalion, because he has made what he believes will complete him.
Right. The perfect, exactly. And I think he even says the perfect complement. He found all other feminine forms or all other relationships lacking, and so he goes in essence to sculpt himself perfection. And what is it? It's perfection, of course, in the eye of the beholder. So it is not an objective perfection or even an independent perfection. It's what he thinks is perfect.
Right. Which is sort of we're just like we've taken one step beyond narcissism. Narcissism.
I like that. I like both of those. One step beyond narcissism. There's a lot of isms in there.
There's a lot of isms in there, yeah. Isn't ism the I've forgotten now. Never mind. So what you're doing is you're taking your own personal viewpoint, and everything is feeding in through your personal viewpoint, your eyes. So when, as we were saying, you're trying to find yourself in this other, and then you want to hear what the other has to say about you, that's like a half step outside your concern. It's like one eyeball you're looking at out of, instead of the perspective of being completely out of your mind.
Completely out of your mind. I want to step back one second, because I think there's something interesting there, because Pygmalion, which you correctly say is it stated was creating perfection. So he is a creator. He is a creator, but it's the flawed creation in this regard, not just because he's a human being, but let's say even he isn't. But in essence, it's a creation of which in and of itself has no independence. It is really a different type of reflection. And if you look at the creator and the creation in those two terms, it is only through the introduction of an independent spirit, an independent will, that you suddenly now have something which can actually be loved and love you back. The creation, which is nothing more than clockwork, or nothing more than just the form that you've created without any will of its own, is static. It's loveless. It's like, if you put it in modern terms, it's like this sort of robot lover. It's nothing more than, it has no independent will, and so therefore it is a form of self-love through inanimate objects, or objects which are nothing more than your puppets. You're controlling this thing and making it I'm going to make it love me. Well, that's kind of, again, incestuous. And I think it brings us back around, before we go too far down that, because it's an interesting topic, but I don't want to go too far down. It brings us back around to the biggest obstacle to a true relationship is you. And by you, we mean the ego you, the I you. The part of you which really wants nothing more than to talk about itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's
when you think of the ego, I always think of if you are a being. The ego to me is this spherical part that happens to intersect with another person. So if you get two spheres together, all you get is that two-dimensional circle as an intersection point. And that's your ego. It has nothing to do with the wholeness of who you are. Your whole being. And if you're talking about love, unconditional love, you're accepting the whole being, not just the part that happens to be intersecting with you on that surface.
Yeah, well, and the other interesting about your analogy, which I like very much, is it is a circle which, again, runs back on itself. It never leaves its boundary. It's always talking about itself.
Isn't that interesting? So the minute you decide that you choose to love, you got to break through those boundaries into another dimension. It's no longer just the two-dimensional.
Yes, and we're kind of jumping ahead, but in fact, I would postulate that the only way that you get to the beginnings of a true relationship is to the extent that you put yourself second. When you start to love, what you say is, that which I care most about is, interestingly enough, not me. Oh my God. People are like, no, that can't be true. No, wait a minute. There are other people to care about that aren't me? Yes, there are. When we talk about unconditional love, we're talking about love. This is an ideal, but we are talking about love, which is selfless, not selfish. It's selfless. It puts the other, the object of your love, above even your own life. We all talk about love greater than life itself. That you would die. What greater friend than would die for me? I'm misquoting it, but what greater love than to die for?
Is there than this, to lay down one's life for a friend?
Gosh darn it, it's so good to have Margaret here, because I'm just floundering around in that quote. I have no idea what I'm about to say. She's like, got the whole thing right here. Could you settle down, take a breath?
Ground.
Could you please say that again while I get a grip on myself?
There is no greater love in this than to lay down one's life for a friend.
And I would say, really, when we say friend, what we're really talking about is the object of one's love. That I think the word friend has become cheap.
It's been overused. Like the word love is overused. At this point, you're like, love is I love pizza.
Mm.
Is that different from loving you? Hopefully.
You could be pizza, and then everybody would love you. Never mind. Moving on. Sorry.
You need to ground her. Come back.
Okay. Yep. Good. But in truth, love is overused, but friend is terribly overused, I think, or at least it's become cheapened. But in the context that we're talking about in that particular quote, this is a bond of selfless friendship. If you're going to lay down your life for another, that means that other is worth more to you in an intrinsic, absolute sense than your own existence. You see, people throw that phrase off like nothing, but if you really are placed into the crucible and say, here is the one you love, and here is you, all that you love, maybe, or that makes up you, and we see the most selfless, or one of the most selfless acts of sacrifice of that type is the cross. But even in small, there are many instances on a daily basis which go totally unsung, where one is in essence laying one's life, putting all that is you, that is of yourself, to the side for the other.
And people have a tendency to use that phrase in a very grand term, where, oh well, you're throwing yourself in front of the bus, pushing the other person out of the way, kind of thing. Very dramatic.
Very dramatic, yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, expressions of love, the opportunity for expressions of love, happen every day. And it is that unsung, unglamorized aspect of it, where the other is always first on your mind, what need be done, whatever is best for the one you love.
Right.
And that is an absolute sacrifice, to consider someone else and their needs before your own. When you have children, it's like baby cries in the middle of the night, no sleep.
Right.
How many people get so grumpy because they get interrupted in their sleep?
Well, that's a great example. I think perhaps certainly people who have children realize that there is an aspect of that love, the love of a child, which is selfless. It has to be, or to the extent that it's not, you're not doing your job as that person's parent. There's a biological imperative. You see this in all. You see it in the animal kingdom. Look at nesting birds, who we know through studying them that they'll go weeks and months, and weeks certainly, basically denying themselves food, or working like crazy trying to feed 6 or 5 for the amount of energy that if they were to be selfish would be easily accomplished by 1/5 of that for themselves alone. No, they feed all those hungry mouths and grab a morsel for themselves and keep right on going. That's an expression, a biological expression of love, in the sense that you are sacrificing your own personal immediate comfort. Existence. Well, yes, comfort, but immediate existence for the existence of the future generation, for the next generation. And I've read, and I think you've probably read too, that there's a very interesting dynamic here, because biologically speaking, there's not a tremendous benefit to the current generation that the next generation live. at least not in a prima facie way. In other words, if you say that I'm doing this so that the next generation will live, and the argument back, biologically speaking, is, well, who cares? Because you're going to be dead, and then who cares if there's anything else after you? So where did this come from? And there's been a lot of interesting studies, and we're not going to go into it now. But that biological imperative, which you see in nature, is only a very small aspect of what, at least what we feel ourselves in dealing with our children, because there's more than just although there certainly is a selflessness in putting children ahead of oneself, but there's truly a sort of a passing of the torch. You're not only just here's the phrase that you hear all the time: I'm working 5 jobs so that they won't have to, that they can get ahead, that they'll have a better life than me. And it's a sort of a generational sacrifice, that in essence, if I do this now for them, that their lives will be easier, that their task will be, they'll have more for themselves.
They'll be better.
They'll be better off. And this sort of a selflessness is certainly a basic aspect of love. But I think it starts before that, because the first relationship is between a spouse, between a husband and wife, or any two spouses. That we started in the beginning of the show saying, well, first there's a reflection of self in the beginning of any relationship. You say, well, hey, they're kind of like me. We have things in common. We both like whatever, or we both have fun doing X, Y, or Z. And so there's an attraction there. But I think relationships don't last unless you find an aspect of that person which you find so valuable to yourself that you begin the process of making that person more important to you than you. And if you don't begin that process, it's like the seed is on stony ground. Yes, it might sprout up and look wonderful, but as soon as the silicone goes flat or the hair goes south, the relationship is done, because it's all based on sort of a, what can you do for me kind of thing. Well, we've all seen relationships like that, but they don't last. They go for a while, and then unfortunately they fade.
Yeah, they dissipate.
When a relationship starts to take root in you, it starts to do two things. It takes your energy to feed it, and it takes a piece of you and says, this which I am nurturing, this relationship, is worth more to me than the energy that I could spend on myself is.
The relationship is more than you.
Yes.
And it becomes a treasure in your heart that you want to be able to hold and keep and nurture, because you realize the relationship is living, breathing, growing thing, energy. And you are much more than who you were to start with in that relationship. It's understanding that's
so important, though. That's exactly it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's understanding that you enter the relationship because there's something there that you wish to nurture. There's something there that you want to blossom. And I remember just in school they would always say, oh yeah, it's like an agricultural thing, where you're planting seeds and it grows and da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, it's energy. And the growth is highly personal, because it becomes you and the person, and then suddenly transpersonal. because the act of putting the concerns of another always before your own breaks the habit form of always thinking about you.
Yes, yes. But I think there's something even more interesting there, because as you do that, the relationship itself becomes greater than the two, at least. Let's say there's at least two in a relationship. That the relationship becomes greater than the sum of its parts, which we all have heard, but it becomes greater because as you nurture a relationship, it grows, and the aspects of the relationship that grow are greater than yourself, because you already put yourself in a position where the relationship matters more to you. The other person matters more to you, but it's also greater than that other person. You mentioned it. It's the shared experiences which become a superset. Even there's a better word than that, where it becomes as you said, an entity in and of itself. So much so that even where once a relationship is established and growing, even were one of the people to die or to no longer be able to contribute because of disease or disability, the relationship itself it changes, but it doesn't become less. It can become even stronger, because it in itself has assumed aspects of the eternal. It has assumed aspects of trans time and trans death, and it persists beyond the death of the original members.
Mm-hmm.
Even both of them into eternity. It becomes part of again this sort of shared experience that we live down here. Relationships are the most important part of that, because they grow the whole energy ball, if you will.
Right. Relationships are reflections of what love is, or what love can be. And it's all combinations that manifest itself in this realm.
They're from the greater.
Right. And expressions of love, you are shown many, many expressions of love. And some of them are unconditional, and many of them are not.
True.
So it is at that point that you get to choose the kind of relationship you would like to enter into. You are being given a tutorial down here on what relationships are, what they can be, and what they shouldn't be.
And I think they grow organically. In other words, you can start at a level, and over the course of a relationship, it will grow. It will become, in and of itself, as you said, it's an experience which both teaches and develops. Your relationship grows in power and in strength and in energy far beyond what either person in it has in sum total put in, because there's the echo of the divine, of the eternal, that comes in. Grace comes into that relationship.
That is one of the baseline things. You need divine grace to grow in a relationship. It's just the way it is. If you relied only on you,
Well, and that's sort of the reflection of you. Well, I tell you what, let's go back to the studio. We'll reflect about love, and we'll reflect about the fact that relationships are so much greater. And when we come back on the other side, we'll talk more about love.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Thank you very much, Steve-Man, and welcome to the second half hour of our never-ending treatise on death. No, we're doing love tonight. We're doing love, and but love and death. But I think the first half hour we had a very interesting take on in essence, love, relationships, because the postulate, the premise of our talk tonight has been that the only way to prosecute love successfully is that you, in essence, get out of the way, get yourself out of the equation. Relationships start there. And there's a really great quote we had dug up, and it'll probably be up on the website soon, if it's not already, from our friend Rumi. And maybe you want to give that a read.
Alrighty. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
And that's really the nub of it, isn't it? Because the very first thing that we start with here is loving ourselves. When we're children, everything seems to revolve around us. People do things for us, and people want us to be happy, and so on and so on. And that's all good, because as a child, you are in a dependent state, and there is a relationship of love of which you are far and away more the receiver than the giver. But that of necessity changes over time, and it should, and it has to. It's very right and proper that as we grow in power, physically, and in the ability to love, we start to go outside of ourselves. You know, the love of self is a small thing. It's an easy thing. And if you never go beyond that, if you never get past that, your relationships will be limited, because they're limited by the ego. They're limited by this I-centric thing.
The thing is, when you are functioning from a reflection, what we mean by that, it's not just finding yourself in the other. It's understanding that you are constantly referring back to you and looking through your eyes at the other. It is defaulting to what your opinion is. It's not really expanding and looking through another person's eyes from a different angle. It's always about you. It's always about, well, I think this. Oh, well, that happened, but I think that this is why that happened.
And it can become toxic, too, because, in essence, what we're saying to the other is that it's your job to make sure I'm happy.
Right, because at that point, all that really matters is your own happiness. The happiness of the relationship is not even on the scope, because you think you are the relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, you laugh, but it's true. And in fact, why those relationships don't work over time is that there's no resonance. Nothing grows from that relationship. It's all take. You're looking, if you keep the relationship focused on the I is a very small outflow and almost all inflow. It's all, in fact, it's not even inflow. It's almost all within itself. You know, it's really looking for, you know, the old phrase, enough of me going on about me. What do you think about me? It's all about yourself.
When you say take, what you're actually doing is you keep taking the image of you. It has nothing to do with embracing the image of another. It's just taking the image of you, your mental construct of what you believe you is. It's very exhausting.
It can be. It's certainly exhausting for the other. But I think we talked earlier in the last half hour about the fact that relationships have to have grace come in, have to have the divine come in. The only way you get there is by dying to self. First, dying to self and allowing the other to come before you. But then what comes of that is dying to self and allowing the eternal to come before all things, and the relationship itself becomes a triumvirate. It becomes you, the other, and the eternal part of both of you, which grows far beyond what either. See, even in a relationship, let me just finish. In the relationship of two, it can both be I. You know, it all can be very small. Even with two, you can find relationships like that. They aren't great relationships, but you can see them. But if you don't get past that into the eternal, even that is too small.
It is when you become a reflection of the divine heart, of the beginning of walking in that unconditional love. Because when two are actually in a relationship like that, and the relationship takes on its own being. You use the old way of saying it is the marriage takes on a life of its own.
Mm.
And that marriage only functions when you constantly give over to the spirit part, the eternal spirit part, because you can't do this alone by yourself. You always need some kind of help or guidance or strength or patience or just prayer. Because your mind, if you live in your ego, your personality is not getting fed. So it starts screaming that, pay attention to me. I need this, that, the other thing, And there is a balance that must be struck between the personal, the self, and the relationship with the other, as well as your relationship with spirit, with that divine aspect, which is God. I'm going to use the word God.
Well, but I think the interesting thing about that is once you train yourself to put the other first, which is the beginning of this. First it's you, then it's the other first. The reward back, excuse me, of that training. Excuse me. Obviously, I shouldn't be talking about this. The reward back of that training is a strengthening of your own spirit that becomes it expands your personal spark into a divine spark.
It allows the access to come. When you begin to train yourself to not constantly think about what you think about it, which is a difficult thing for many people.
Yeah, I think it's difficult in the beginning for all.
But once you begin to do that and actually function from a much broader perspective at that point, it's way back when we used to have the exercises of being able to speak without using the pronoun I.
Oh, yeah, that was the one you used to give to people.
And because your speech reveals how you think.
Mm.
So if you kind of just observe yourself speaking and count how many times you use the pronoun I, it gives you an indication of how often you think about what you think about it, or how I feel about it, or what my opinion is.
Yeah, right.
It's absolutely fascinating. You just you go through one day doing that, counting how many times you've used the pronoun I or me.
Right.
Okay, me also counts.
I don't forget who said that, but it was so funny. Well, can I use me instead? Like, no, you can't. But the exercise, I think there's another exercise in that when you look to your relationship, and you said it earlier, last half hour, people are looking for these grand gestures. Like I would throw myself into a raging torrent of river to say, now, when you walk downstairs and somebody, the person that you're in relationship needs something, or you want to do whatever it is, you want to go, do whatever's on your mind, and you come into the situation and you can see right away that, right now this person needs something else, and rather than put yourself first, you put them first. That becomes your habit. It becomes a basis of behavior. It becomes a way of thinking that it isn't that you stop existing, but you stop thinking about you all the time. The behavior of I talking, as you said, betrays the inner I thinking. The behavior of a relationship in which you lose you, also quiets that inner I voice. It's sort of a meditation. The Buddhists talk about quieting the inner voice of really the I, the ego. In relationship, you can do the exact same thing. It becomes a moving meditation that instead of saying, what do I want? You think, what does the other want? What does the person that I love want? And
what is needed.
Or what is needed. But the point is that in pushing the ego into its proper place, you're not becoming a non-entity. You're becoming you're becoming a vast entity, a being which has an ego but doesn't rely upon it for every blessed second of the day in order for it to look in the mirror and say, yeah, there I am. Don't I look good? Yes. So what do you think? Do you think I look good? Yes. But no, you get past that. When people say to another, oh, their relationship is so good, and she was so lucky, or he was so lucky, and I wish I could find that relationship, the selflessness, the losing of self in a relationship is incredibly attractive to others. They see that and say, wow, there's people who are really doing it right. They're really solid. But there's nothing about them which screams ego, yet the ego will be fed in that. The acclamation of which the ego survives upon will come from not paying attention to it all the time, but in essence making it part of you, a small part of you, that that is part of a being which loves another being. And then those who look upon this will look on this relationship and say, that's something really special. And I wish I could have that. And in fact, anyone and everyone can, but it takes the commitment, it takes the work, it takes the getting out of your own way. What Rumi says here, which is finding the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And you have built them.
Yeah, the it is the unconditional love. It is participating and being in that state of love. Mm. The ego finds its place when this is there. When that love is there is a quieting in that soul, because it realizes that it is loved. Mm. And frankly, that is what most people are looking for, is the acknowledgement that I am loved by another.
Absolutely.
And when you get that, when you go through your stages, whether it's your family or whether it's in your marriage relationship, you begin to see the limitations that come with those different types of love. Whether it is you're a child and you were loved by your parent, that had limitations. Then the love that you have for another, and whether or not you are actually married, that kind of commitment and love, that also has limitations. And then having children, and suddenly you're the parent, and the love that you have for the child or with the child, again, limitations. So as you progress in every relationship, it changes through time and space. So you can get a 360 feel for what love actually is in total.
The interesting, I love the beginning of that where you were saying that basically the ego gets what it wants by not being the center of everything all the time.
It finds its place. Most people's egos are screaming because they're looking for that love. And once it is there, without the mental limitations of what you think love is, all right, you are in that wonderful back and forth growth and feel heart to heart. And you have resonance, and you have commitment and growth. It means that you have to let go of a lot of things, you have to forgive a lot of things, and you got to lose yourself in order to grow that way.
Exactly. And the part of you that thought that it was totally essential and it was the only way we were going to get there, this feeding of the ego, gets what it wants by being being put into, as you said, its proper place. And I think, again, as you said, the growth of relationships and the multiple facets of love, of which it is, there's no one aspect of you which can be said, there's love, there it is, we can just bottle it. No. All the different things, all the different relationships that you go through, all have aspects of that. But then you start to see, if you begin to really develop this relationship into the divine, into the eternal, that all of these things are aspects of a vastness of you, a vastness of being, that each one of them inhabits, it engenders a certain amount of energy, and it provides more than even the relationship itself that it started with. You quiet the ego, you quiet the
wanting.
I was going to say the neediness, the wanting, and you grow closer and closer to the unattainable here, which is the unconditional love. But you start to see the glimmers, and to the extent it becomes so selfless that you can get to be where you are loving all of mankind, like a Mother Teresa, like a saintly kind of love, where it's no longer even about you. It's so not about you that you're burning from the inside out, and it doesn't matter anymore. That your personal, physical, carnate existence doesn't matter anymore. This is becoming enlightened. It's becoming part of nirvana. It's becoming the Christ energy. Put it all these different things, whatever it is. But you're now beyond the personal aspect of being in love. You're into the eternal aspect of being in love. And so, from the seed of the ego seeing something that reflects itself and thought, oh, that's cute, that's cool, it looks like me. You grow throughout the course of a lifetime, closer and closer, to the extent that you put the energy into the love of the eternal, the love that which is closer and closer to unconditional love. That's the journey here, and getting yourself out of the way is an essential component. And you'll find, to the extent that you get you out of the way, you yourself are actually more and more and more involved without being in the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're expanding who you are.
Right. There you go. Exactly.
It's not just these little boxes or lists that you've checked off it. Well, I like the color blue, and I don't like this. I don't like that smell, or I don't want to eat that, or this old way of the pros and cons. What was that? Benjamin Franklin trying to figure out something. You had to make a list of pros and cons to figure out what to do. It is understanding that you are more than a list. of what you like and what you don't like.
Oh,
So much more that there's the part of you that your heart speaks from, that soul that you are, sings. It knows that this is where I must take my next step. It has nothing to do with sitting there and thinking about it.
Right. And that is, in essence, getting the you out of it, the ego out of it, and realizing that these small things, these lists, those are just the very, very, very beginning. So to love, you have to lose yourself.
Indeed. Who am I at that point?
And you will discover who you are. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I am Margaret. Thank you for listening.